There was once a time when silence meant something. Not the kind of silence that fills awkward rooms or covers up what should be said, but a silence that breathes, that listens, that contains everything. This was the silence in which Aryamitra was born. Not into a family, not into a village, not even into a story. He was born into a monastery hidden in the high folds of the Himalayas, where clouds and thoughts drift alike. From the moment he could walk, he was trained not to run. Not because running was forbidden, but because speed was considered noise. To walk, to breathe, to observe the flicker of a candle for hours, that was knowledge. His first lesson was this: the world you see is not the world that is. Learn to sit long enough to watch the illusions fall. For years, Aryamitra meditated beside ancient walls inscribed with prayers no one remembered writing. He watched the seasons change as if they were the moods of the sky. He memorized the texture of his breath, the rhythm of his heartbeat, the way thoughts formed and vanished like snowflakes on warm stone. But eventually, the questions that even monks cannot avoid began to rise in him like seeds pushing through winter. What is this world? What is real? Is this stillness the answer, or just a pause? His master, an old man who looked like he had swallowed the moon and held it inside his chest, one day handed him nothing but a bag and a smile. You have studied shadows. Now go walk in them. Find the nature of reality, not in the silence of the monastery but in the noise of the world. And when you forget what you're looking for, keep going. That's when you'll begin. So Aryamitra descended from the mountains with bare feet and a head full of silence. He entered cities like a ghost returning to life. People rushed past him, wearing their names like armor, their fears like perfumes. They spoke fast, loud, and often without meaning. Everywhere people were selling pieces of themselves: time, identity, opinions. It was a market of egos. He tried to talk, but most didn't listen. He tried to listen, but most didn't talk, only echoed. Some called him a beggar, others a prophet. But few looked him in the eye. One day a child did. The boy stared at him with wonder, tugged his mother's hand and said, "Is he real?" That question haunted Aryamitra more than any scripture. Is he real? What did that mean? The boy had seen him. He had touched the earth. He could feel hunger and wind. But was he more real than the characters in dreams? More real than a thought believed too long? He walked into a grand palace where a rich man welcomed him. The man had built his empire from numbers and gold, from controlling the visible world. He laughed when Aryamitra asked about truth. You still seek it? The man said, sipping aged wine. Truth is for those who have nothing. Real is what you can touch, own, manipulate. Your robe? Useless. My bank account? Real. Want to see reality? Look at the stock market. Aryamitra only asked one thing: are you happy? The man didn't answer. He poured another drink. Aryamitra stayed that night, watching the man stare into a mirror longer than he ever looked at any living soul. In the morning he left without a sound. And with him he carried no new truth, only a deeper suspicion. Maybe people cling to illusions not because they believe them, but because they fear the emptiness beneath them. He walked toward the river, drawn to a current older than civilization. There he met an old Buddhist who sat for days at the bank, smiling at death as if it were an old friend. They spoke little. The monk handed Aryamitra a clay cup of water and said, "Watch." The river took the water. The cup remained. The cup is form, the monk whispered, but what it holds, flows. And that's all of us. Bodies are cups. Ego is shape. But truth is what moves when you stop holding. Aryamitra understood something without understanding. He bathed in that river not to clean his body, but to let go of the names he had collected along the way. Seeker, Monk, Man. Each washed off like dust. The water knew only flow. And for the first time he allowed himself to be carried by something larger than himself. Later, in a quiet village, he met a philosopher who had read every book ever printed on metaphysics. The man had notebooks full of contradictions, paradoxes, and thought experiments. Reality is just perception, the philosopher said. What you think is a tree is just light interpreted by your brain. What you feel is pain is just a signal. Even you, even your self, is a hallucination. You do not exist the way you think you do. Aryamitra paused. Then, what remains? The philosopher smiled like a magician revealing the final trick. Only awareness, only the witness. That night, Aryamitra sat alone and tried not to think. But thoughts came. He tried not to feel, but feelings came. Finally he let them pass. He watched them like clouds. And in that watching, something strange happened. There was no more him. There was only watching. Days later, a scientist invited Aryamitra to a conference. She showed him graphs, particles, and models of the universe. Nothing is solid, she explained. Atoms are 99.999% empty space. Time bends. Space curves. Observation changes matter. Consciousness might be the code behind the simulation. We don't live in the universe. We dream it. Aryamitra did not laugh. He only asked, if the world is a dream, who is the dreamer? No one answered. And yet, the question echoed in his bones long after the buildings disappeared behind him. Years passed. Aryamitra stopped looking for answers and began noticing questions. He spoke less. He observed more. He slept under stars that didn't care about his journey. He dreamed of other lives, other selves, even other worlds. In one dream he was a child. In another, a king. In another, a bird. In each, he believed that version of him was real, until he woke. Eventually he asked himself, if every dream feels real until you awaken, what if this life is the same? One morning while walking through a desert he collapsed. Heat, hunger, and solitude had worn him thin. He lay on the sand, breath shallow, heart slow. He expected death. But what came was peace. Not an idea. Not a philosophy. But a deep, wordless presence. He saw his body like clothing, useful, temporary. He saw time like weather, passing, unpredictable. And he saw reality not as something to be found, but something to be surrendered to. When he awoke he felt no fear. He did not know where he was. But he was there. Fully. Finally. Years later he returned to the mountains. His master, now older than silence itself, welcomed him with a look that carried centuries. Did you find reality? The master asked. Aryamitra smiled faintly. I found what cannot be found. I lost what could never be kept. And the master simply nodded. For some truths there are no words. Only presence. Now, traveler, seeker, dreamer, this story is not just about a monk. This is your story. Because even as you listen now, something in you is wondering, what is real? The answer is not in books or beliefs or even in this story. It is in the space between your thoughts. In the silence beneath the noise. In the awareness that hears this voice right now. That is what has always been real. Not the form. Not the role. Not the name. But the one who watches. The forgotten monk is not someone else. He is you, waiting to remember.